David, thank you so much for being on board the transatlantic. Your ocean is amazing. I know that. So grateful to have you here today.
So grateful to be here, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you, man. So as you know, at Transatlantic, we believe that each of us is an ocean of melodic thoughts and wide feelings. Your story, your background, your upbringing, it's fascinating to say at least. So I'm very excited to go through the 7 questions, like the 7C, and I would say, let's get to it. First question, okay?
Go for it.
Good. Buy the ticket, take the ride is the title of the documentary about Arthur Thompson. It's a documentary narrated by Nick Nolte. It opened up with a very curious image. Is Arthur swimming in a large blue swimming pool wearing a Richard Nixon mask. Notoriously, he hated Richard Nixon. Anyway, if you look at the sentence, buy the ticket, take the ride, in a urban dictionary, you're gonna get this definition: creating and being involved in a situation that might get you in a way over your head, but decide that turning back will be a rather uninteresting option. Now, have you ever encountered such a situation in your career, in your life? In few words, have you ever bought a ticket, taken the ride?
Oh, man. Well, first of all, what a brilliant question. And thank you very much for having me on this podcast. Yes, I've bought the ticket and taken the ride more times than I can remember. But I'd be remiss if I didn't share the belief first, as it's a particular belief that ultimately leads to the rides, right? And it begins with my higher voice and my ability to understand what it is and the courage to embrace it in everything that I do. And you can call that voice whatever you want. You can call it your gut, your instincts, your God, your soul, your light, your source, whatever that may be. But it is a voice that it's a voice that feels so much bigger than any challenge, feels bigger than a ride. And when I listen to this voice, everything turns out great. When I don't listen to it, well, then that's when I have, that's when the bad things happen, right? And it's really the ability to listen to that voice before I jump on the ride, right? Because there are a lot of people out there who just jump on the ride just for the sake of doing it or for some adrenaline rush. But for me, I align with the voice first, and then I know that my intent is that I'm doing it because it's the right thing to do. And I'm doing it because I know it's going to make me stronger. I know it's going to make me more brave. I know I'm going to be able to sort of access more wisdom and learn more life lessons because of that. And so that's the sort of process that I use before I get on that ride, right? And so when you understand that, then you know that what you're doing is purposeful. What you're doing is meaningful, and that you're not just doing it for the sake of doing it. And so I also know, based on my upbringing, that challenges are a fact of life and that they're in your life for a reason, for you to understand who you really are and also to help unlock whatever life lessons that you need to learn. And so I know that those rides are, you have to take a huge leap of faith, right? And that's where bravery comes in. Bravery gives you permission to know who you are, and then from that base of knowing who you are, you know what's in you, you know what you're capable of doing, and you know that it's not about the challenges, but more so about the lessons, or it's not about the storm, but the rainbow that's behind it. And so I take that approach to every ride. And I would say one of my first and I have many rides, of course, that I've taken, but I'd say one of the most important is when I decided to move to New York after graduating from college. And I don't know how much you know about my background, but I come from a very, very humble roots, and we didn't have a lot growing up. We're a very big family. And we didn't have a lot is an understatement. And I knew that I could have stayed in San Francisco or that area, the East Bay, close to my family, but I knew that if I wanted to challenge myself, if I wanted to see what, the extent of my bravery, that I'd have to step outside of my comfort zone, knowing I'll be better off for it. And so what happened was I received a postcard in the mail by someone that read, "Do what you fear, watch it disappear." And I put it up on my fridge, and I thought it was a really cool postcard, right? That if I just lean into whatever I feared most, that it would make me, it would make me stronger, make me braver, make me more wise. And so the first question I asked after graduating from college was, what city, what city could I live in, could I work in that would challenge me the most? And, there are many cities out there, great advertising cities, but New York was the one that really made me, that scared me the most. And at the time, I heard nothing but, you know, muggings and, just watching the news and watching, various shows from New York, whether it was Hill Street Blues or any of those shows that sort of, that personify the, the violence and all of the crime and all that. I mean, it's enough to scare anyone, right?
New York
And
is the perfect city to do that.
it is the
You know,
perfect. It is.
I mean, it's
It
like,
is.
yeah, please.
And I remember I didn't know anyone there. I literally didn't know anyone. And I'm the type of person, or at least at the time, was in my comfort zone was my family or my circle, right? So to move all the way cross country without knowing anyone there, and all I had was a 10 speed of basketball and a sleeping bag, and what, $300 in my pocket because my mom gave me some spending money. Um, that took a tremendous amount of courage. And the first month I was part of a I was part of a mugging, where I had the opportunity to come back home because, that could scare anyone, getting mugged. um, I just realized that the more I leaned into it, the more I saw the opportunity. And I remember my first night was in Harlem, staying at a friend of a friend of a friend's house. I was sleeping on the floor, and I, went up to the rooftop at like 2 o'clock in the morning because I couldn't sleep. It was my first night, first day in New York. And I just looked at the park. It was all lit up, Central Park. I just saw this beautiful glow of the whole city. And I just kind of said to myself that I was going to kick its ass. And I knew that I had to take that approach to the city or it was going to eat me up.
What a
And
great lesson. What a great lesson for all the young creatives out there. Like, the reason why
yeah,
I start Transatlantic is to get these kind of stories out there. And, I know one thing about your upbringing. I remember reading, like, the way you grew up, having an amazing, like, role model, your father. There was one sentence that I read that really, really, like, resonated with me. And it was like, "No man left behind."
yeah,
And it was such a
yeah.
great insight. And you were talking,
Leave no man behind.
right,
That's
leave no man
that.
behind. You were talking about bravery
Hmm.
and companionship and supports. And I think that's your inner voice
Hmm.
that you were just mentioning earlier. It was shaped by all these events that happen in your life.
Yep.
About you, what I truly love is the sense of community that you have, the sense of multitude that you have inside yourself, and that make you so brave. So this is awesome, man. This is awesome.
That's a beautiful observation. And furthermore, I just want to tell you, when I remember leaving New York the first time,
Hmm.
because I've I've already lived there twice, and I'm moving there like in a month, so to be my third time living in New York. But as I was leaving the first time, I remember driving in a cab going across the bridge on my way to JFK. And I took a job in LA, and as I was, driving over the bridge, I looked back at the city and I screamed out the window, "I kicked your ass." And to me,
Really
that, yeah, and I mean, here I
amazing.
am only 3 years into advertising, and I'm telling New York I kicked its ass.
That's the
But what
right
I
attitude. That's
it
the
is the right, and it's the only attitude,
is
you
the
know, because if you when you understand, you know, that you have this force within you that is capable of overcoming any challenge in life, when you come into that sort of understanding, that's when you're able to manifest whatever you want. And it's not in a way that, you know, I want to manifest, you know, profits or any of those, you know, those sort of material things. It really is about manifesting, you know, right from the core, from that inner voice, and creating things or opportunities for people to unlock their own inner voice as well. So my dad taught me these three really important values. And also, just so you know, my dad was he came from a broken home where his mom sort of abandoned the family, and he lived out of a car with his dad and his brothers and sisters. And so he came from hardship, like real hardship, right? And then when he went to war, and he got shot up pretty bad. He was part of the 1st Marines Division, which is, you know, the toughest Marines division out there. Like, my dad signed up for the, you know, for the guys that were going to be on the front line. And he suffered, he got shot up pretty bad, got 2 Purple Hearts, but you know, came home a pretty came home pretty messed up, and he had severe PTSD, you know, his entire life, which was a war in itself, right? And so the challenges that we grew up with as kids, can't even describe it. But what I will tell you is that there was a voice on the inside of me that guided me throughout the whole process, as well as these 3 values that my father instilled in us. And it goes like this. Number 1, never forget where you're from, right? Never forget that you are Filipino and Portuguese, and that you come from, you know, humble roots. So you don't ever get ahead of yourself. You don't ever think you're better than anybody else, even if, no matter how successful you become. So that's number 1. Number 2, always give 100% of your heart and soul. Like, if you're going to do something, don't give 90% and expect 100% in return, right? Go all in. Give everything, every ounce, leave it on the table. Just all make sure that you are all in, that you show up, you know, in business and in life. Number 3, never forget those who are less fortunate, right? And just because you become successful, don't forget where you're from. Don't forget, you know, that you, you know, grew up, you know, in very humble roots, and that there are so many kids out there and people who are as fortunate as you, you know, who haven't realized their success the way you have, and just do whatever you can to help them leapfrog. And that's been my sort of mission. Those 3 things. When you
well,
look at what I'm doing, those are the 3 things, the values that my dad instilled in us. And it gets, you know, conveyed in different ways by our family members, you know. But I do believe that those things have been building blocks for starting my own agency, to starting my own nonprofit, to being a dad, to where I am today. So
absolutely. They say that parents give us like a toolbox, a tool
yeah,
for living.
I don't even think he was aware that he gave that to us. But, you know,
What
at the end of the day, you know, you take what you learn from your family, right? And I think that the inner voice gave me this really beautiful way of looking at something, that it was less about forgiving, you know, the challenges that we were up against, and more about understanding. And so going from, you know, being angry at a certain thing to understanding, brought a whole other level of wisdom to the table, and enabled me to really look at my father and what he had gone through as a kid. And I couldn't even imagine growing up where your mom sort of, you know, disowns you. And I couldn't even imagine going to war at 17 years old and getting shot up and all of that. I just couldn't imagine any
Yeah,
of that.
I read that part, and I was, you know, it's almost like it's so heroic and so, like, you know, heartbreaking, that I almost like felt like fiction, that you're reading a book, but it's actually like real life.
It's real life. It's real life. And it happened for me. I was taking my dad on a fishing trip because he loved to fish, and I grew up fishing. And when I turned 32, I had the ability to take him to Alaska. So it's just the two of us going to Alaska fishing on the Kenai River. And I remember being on the plane, and I just wanted to ask him about his war experience. And I had never talked to him about that before. But when he started to talk about what he saw and what he experienced, I couldn't believe it. I was just like, oh my God, how is this person even going through any of that? And when he told me of the people that he killed and how he crawled underneath his tank and held on to his prayer card, and he was all shot up and he thought he was going to die, and then he woke up in a hospital, and those reoccurring nightmares that he had his entire life, he explained them to me. And so when I understood that, it gave me a greater sense of what he had gone through. And also it gave me permission to, I saw myself as I became the parent, I became the parent looking at a wounded child.
That is an amazing,
yeah. And it's, and I'm still learning, I mean, we're all learning, at the end of the day, but I believe that, when I look at that experience, and I now can look at everything, from a different perspective, where I can see the purpose of the role he played in my life, the role that my brothers and sisters play in my life, the role that people that I meet, and all of those people that have come into my life, I can see that they're all purposeful, and they all have a sort of, amazing role in this journey that I'm on, and I have an amazing role in their journey as well.
This is a remarkable answer to your first question. We are up for a long journey, but it's so fascinating that I can't contain my excitement. So the second question for you is this: a high performance watercraft can exceed the velocity of the wind. Mm-hmm. It's called high speed sailing. When you do that, the surface of the ocean appears different, and hidden details pop into your eyes.
Yeah.
Now, speed is a little tricky thing. For instance, I have a fascinating fact for you. If you watch The Joker, the movie, with Joaquin Phoenix, if you watch at speed 0.25, you start realizing that there are clues in the movie that you don't see at normal speed. For instance, there is a visual countdown from 11 to 1 throughout the entire film. The numbers appear sequentially on walls, subway panels, background of a television network.
Yeah.
So my question for you is this: did it ever happen in your career when you were doing the creative work or you were reviewing the creative work that you just changed the speed as you were moving through life and you just figured it out? You just could crack the code, or you just could see something that you couldn't see at normal speed?
It's a beautiful question, man. I can't believe you get all these amazing ways of leaning into a universal truth. But I'm going to answer it from a perspective that I believe helps me observe the journey, right? And the journey, meaning it could be anything. It's where you were born to, being a dad, being married, being a dad, to being a CEO, to whatever it may be. Because I believe at the end of the day that business and life, if you do what you love, business and life, there are no lines at all, right? And one of the things that I constantly stress to people, that when you understand who you are, and you embrace that in everything that you do, well, why would that ever stop at a certain time, right? It's kind of crazy, right? So I don't look at what I do as being a job. I look at it as being my calling. And a job is something that you need to do. A calling is something that you want to do. So when I look at my job as a creator, as a leader, I don't think about the walls of David and Goliath. I think about my life and how I apply that to everything that I do. And I think that really,
do you ever move at the same speed, or you change speed throughout the day?
I'm going to get to that. So what I've been able to do, I mean, Steve Jobs once said this, that, you know, the key to life is connecting the dots, of being able to look at all the dots and see them for what they really are, right? And first and foremost, I believe in that. I also believe that everything happens for a reason, and that everything is the way it's supposed to be. That there may be a bird that shows up at your window and taps on the window, and you're just, you know, at one point you're just going like, there's a noisy bird out there. But if you take a step back and you look at it from an observer perspective, you're able to see things that you weren't able to see before, right? And that's the slowdown that we're talking about, where you actually transcend speed altogether, and you take a look at things from a higher perspective, an observer perspective, that is far away from fear, far away from judgment, far away from blame, shame, or any type of human experience. And when you're able to look at it from that perspective, you can see things for what they really are. You can see that somebody came into your life for a reason, that the job that you got fired from actually was the best lesson in the world, right? As opposed to being a job that you hated, that, you know, that there are no serendipitous moments. It's just a matter of you being able to observe them, see them for what they really are, and be able to take away whatever message is being given to you, right? So I can easily look at things from that speed where there is no time continuum, there is no speed whatsoever. It's just looking at it from a more omnipresent viewpoint. And so that gives me the opportunity to see things and notice things that most people wouldn't even think about. And so you see that and feel that when you're walking down the street, and all of a sudden you see leaves rustling, and you look up and you get lost in that moment. And then all of a sudden, from within that moment, it feels so much bigger and much more epic and much more grander than you would ever have given, you know, credit to, because you are now observing as opposed to just making your way through life. And when I'm in my, you know, when I'm looking at work, you know, sometimes I'm observing the entire room, and I can see and pick up on energy around the table. I can see and pick up energy on whether or not a client has had too much coffee or not enough coffee, or whatever. But being able to take that sort of snapshot view enables me to think clearly, and also helps direct what I'm going to say, how I'm going to present it, and while taking in all of those details, you know, all at once. And ultimately, at the end of the day, that it's just about being aware, right? And having that sort of greater sense of self-awareness, that, you know, you're constantly, as an artist, you're constantly grabbing things here and there and using it, you know, using it in whatever you manifest. But it's that ability to be able to, I wouldn't say slow things down, but just to transcend all of that, so that you can pick up on those details, you can notice things differently, and you can see them for what they really are. And what they really are beautiful messages of opportunity, and beautiful messages of you know, why things work, and how the universe is kind of working on your behalf, as opposed to you controlling everything.
You raise a great like, with your analogy, you made me think about another elements, which is like, you know, the position you are in, right? You say you can observe, and you can distance yourself, and you can have a snapshot of what's going on, or you can decide to be involved, and that will change completely. And we mentioned like Hunter Thompson, and one of the things,
I met Hunter Thompson in a bar once.
Right?
Crazy.
Oh my God, that's another like three,
Yeah,
like,
it's a whole other world. I'll tell you about that later.
But one of the things that Hunter Thompson did and create a new genre, which is like the gonzo journalism, was literally like what you just said. Instead of like observing, as like most of the journalists do, without interjecting yourself, he changed slightly position, interject himself into the story, creating like the gonzo journalism. So when I formulated the question, I only mentioned the speed, you made me realize that speed is just one part of the equation, where you have, like, you know, the distance like is another part of the equation. The angle is another part of the equation. The way you position yourself is another part of the equation. Again, I'm a big like boxing fan, so
Me too.
I should have,
I'm a very big boxing fan.
right. So I should have thought that speed and distance, it's all what make like the Swiss science a Swiss science, right? So thank you.
Think about Bruce Lee for a second, right?
Right.
Bruce Lee, who's one of my
Amazing martial artist. Yeah.
greatest mentors out there, right? When I think about Bruce Lee and I think about what he says and how he flows, be like water, right? And you know, whenever he talks, yeah, I don't think speed has anything to do with it. I think it's the belief of who you are and the fact that you can be omnipresent, you can do anything, right? As when you believe in that force, when you believe in that, you know, that inner voice. And you know, when I watch him play ping pong with nunchucks, I don't know if you've seen that on. It's like the most insane thing out there. You go like, well, how can he do that? Right. And
timing is also another great element.
Timing, but when you transcend all of that, there's no sense of time anywhere, right? Because so I created a system, you know, because I'm a creative, right? And I found a way to sort of create this way of looking at things from that perspective. And I think I shared this with you before, but it's the whole notion that you know, it's so funny that you're talking about movies. You know, we are all movies. You're a movie, I'm a movie, we're all movies, right? And we all have different chapters to our movie, you know. And you know, when you watch Netflix and you turn on a certain show and you can see all the chapters of that movie, and when you're able to see everything all at once, you go, oh my God, I could see why the first chapter is connected to the second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth, right? And you know, or you're stuck in the chapter, right? You're stuck in the chapter and you feel that, oh my God, I'm stuck in this chapter where I feel the pain of that chapter. I feel the blame, the guilt, and all the, you know, life conditioning of that chapter. But when you transcend all of that and you go up high, you can then see all of the chapters of life, and it gives you so much greater clarity. First of all, you have no fear, no judgment, and no blame, right? Because you're not connected to those chapters. If anything, what you really are, you're not the movie, you're all of the movies all at once, which is Netflix. And so Netflix to me is a great analogy in that you can be all the movies all at once and look at one singular movie and be able to detach yourself from any of those, detach yourself from the ego, right? Which then gives you a greater perspective of the journey that you're on. And so you're not like you once you're able to look at it that way, you then realize that wait a minute, I'm not the movie, I'm actually the observer. And so that's what I try to instill in our employees. It's called B_Netflix. And I try to instill that in our employees, and I try to do that. I've been doing it around the world, you know, for the past 2 years, and creating these really beautiful art directed sort of examples of how you can connect with your higher self and be able to look at the chapters below with no judgment, but to be able to see where you can go from there.
You were mentioning like Netflix and your accounts. I'm one of the follower of your accounts. Like just recently, I started following like the Netflix Instagram accounts that you have, and I found very like interesting the way you communicate the message through like everyday object. Like, you know, I remember like one of the latest that you did as a post, it was using like limes. Another one using like scissors, and like another one using like a espresso coffee cup. And I thought that was like super interesting. So I actually advise everybody like to go on the Instagram accounts and follow, because like the message behind is extremely interesting and fascinating. And the contrast of communicating this big message through like a very simple, like everyday object is what it's like so fascinating. So great, man.
It's using pop culture, which is Netflix, that gives you permission to look at the bigger picture and all the chapters of your life, and then uses art direction, where I take objects that are meaningful to that person that I'm doing it with, and I lay it out in a way that gives them permission to look at things, from a higher perspective. And so the cool thing about it is that I've done it all around the world, and in Africa to Morocco to with UFC fighters and actors and a senator. I mean, it's pretty crazy, as well as a lot of people at our agency. And so, when I show an advertising person that, they go, "Oh, that's great. Are you trying to pitch the business?" I'm like, "No, I'm not trying to pitch the business. I'm just using the metaphor." And so, yeah, I love it, because I think that, when you can get to that point, then you can see things a lot clearer. And it also gives you an opportunity to reimagine what's possible, whether you are a CEO of an ad agency to, to whatever, a ball player or an artist, whatever that may be. If you're given that permission to reimagine, then you're constantly evolving. And I think that's the most important part, the most important part that we can take away from, from our experiences, is the, ability to evolve and to transform yourself, and know that, at the end of the day, there's no limit to, how much you can evolve. It's just being able to recognize that, that growth is so important in everyday life. And if it's not, then you're stagnant, right?
Definitely, definitely. We're going for the third question.
Oh, shoot. All right.
Okay. Peter
on.
Benchley, the author of the 1974 novel Jaws, had a long-time fascination with sharks. He frequently encountered sharks while he was like swimming with his father. Now, as a result, for years, he had considered writing a story about sharks that attack people and what would happen if it doesn't go away. Now what he did, he took his fear and put it onto the pages.
Yeah.
And now you got an amazing novel that became a super cool movie that we all know. His bravery results in transforming fear from a negative source into a positive, creative energy. Now, in 2016, you founded the nonprofit Today I Am Brave, a movement designed to inspire bravery on a true global impact. Was it a gradual and internal process that led you to found the movements? Or was it an epiphany, something that you had overnight that triggered your idea of the movement and then kick you into action?
It's a great question. I believe that there's, going back to the first two questions, right? Because these are all sort of linked together so eloquently. I think that, yes, there was an epiphany, but I also believe that there is a sort of, there's been quite a few things that have led up to that epiphany, right? And one of the things I remember was when we first started David and Goliath. The whole idea behind it was we didn't want to create an agency per se, because, after working in the business for like 10 years, I won a lot of awards, and I started to see the business differently, right? There were so many, great creative shops that I worked for, but the crazy part about it is that they never knew or could convey who they were, what they stood for outside of just the work, and it was one of those things where the number one mandate was to win awards, right? And which I love the idea of getting awards, but it's just gotten so out of hand, when you think about it. And, I reached a point, in my career early on where I decided that I didn't want to make that the number one mission. I wanted that to be a byproduct of a spirit, and create an entity, a creative entity that inspired the challenger in all of us, and really look at it through the lens of how can we help unlock that spirit in people, at our agency, so that they can, the byproduct of that is going to be bigger and braver ideas for challenger brands. And how can we do that in a way that helps them become better humans while they're doing it? And so we applied a one-word philosophy to that action called brave. And brave isn't about jumping out of a plane or shoving work down a client's throat, which is what a lot of people talk about these days. Brave is simply having the courage to be who you are, because that takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of work to embrace that truth, right? And to stay true. And because it's so much easier to be something you're not, whether you're a person or a brand. And so bravery for us was about living it from the inside out. It's not this thing we put on a t-shirt and give out at picnics or barbecues, or it's not like a buzz phrase that we use at with the trades and all that. It's really this internal philosophy that that we inspire in everyone through a series of initiatives, from the getting people to put up their biggest fears on a wall, called the Wall of Goliath, to our Brave Stage, which invites people to stand on a stage and speak their truth, to the 10 Brave Ways, which is these irrefutable truths that we all aspire to at the agency, to the nonprofit that we created called Today I'm Brave. And Today I'm Brave started with the notion that I've always believed that bravery is in everyone, and that the philosophy isn't just owned by David and Goliath. Yes, it comes from the genesis of David and Goliath. Right? David had to be brave in order to defeat Goliath. But it really is about unlocking that bravery in every single person, because I know we all have it in us. And so when I also thought that bravery, it would be pretty amazing if bravery could live outside the walls of our agency, not just on the inside. And so I meditate, and I picked up meditation like maybe 5 years ago, because I was just looking for a way to process things and tap into that inner voice a little bit more. And I remember during my meditation, when you think about what meditation is, and this was transcendental, and when you think about the process of how you are separating thoughts from this space, or trying to distant thought, by putting it somewhere or letting it go. I remember I reached a certain point within my meditation where there was no room for any type of thoughts or fear or questions or any of that madness, that chatter that goes on in your head every day. And it was at that point when I reached that sort of void, that nothingness, that this image or a knowing just kicked in, and it was this thing, thought or belief or whatever. I don't know. I can't even put it together. But I just knew that I was supposed to adopt an orphanage in Africa. And so I came out of that thinking what was that? And I told my wife, who's Cuban, and she said, why Africa? And I said, I don't know. I just need to follow it up. And it was that need to follow it up, need to make happen, because I just knew that it was something that was beyond fear, beyond question, beyond doubt, beyond judgment, beyond any type of personal or human intention. And I told a friend, and he introduced me to this woman named Tiffany Persons, who at the time, she was a casting director here in LA, but also she started this nonprofit in Sierra Leone called Shine on Sierra Leone. And we sat down and I talked to her about putting bravery inside the school and creating an educational curriculum and really giving them a movement that could hopefully unlock their bravery and get them to take on the challenges that they were going through, like Ebola. Many of them had lost their parents to Ebola, and as well as give them the inspiration and the faith and the hope and the determination to keep their school open during this really tough pandemic. And it's crazy that you think about the fact that we're going through a pandemic now, and I was just there, last year and talking to them. But, when you think about the challenges that they have to contend with on a daily basis, they're so much bigger than the ones that we have to deal with. And so we put this movement within the school, and 6 months later, we received this video from them talking about their transformation. And it just blew us away that they were just so inspired by this program that we gave to them. And so we thought to ourselves, if we can have an effect like that 6,000 miles away, imagine what we could do for the rest of the world. And so we rolled it out, went to Children's Hospital, the cancer ward at Children's Hospital, and sat down with these kids and really talked to them about bravery. And we gave them these manifesto cards. I don't know if you've ever seen them, but there's like 5 beautiful, it's a Today I'm Brave card with 5 beautiful statements, attritions on the back of it. And these kids would read them out loud on the cancer ward, at the cancer ward. And it was pretty profound to hear these kids who I believe embrace bravery and represent bravery better than I could ever, because they're going up against challenges that we can't even imagine. And the fact they were reading these cards out loud just inspired us to make it, to continue rolling it out, to show the kids in Sierra Leone the impact that they're creating simply by embracing the movement. And we started a speaker series from there to raise funds for home shelter, Covenant House, to IAVA Veterans Association, which I'm a very big part of because of my father, to and then for the kids in Sierra Leone, we raised a lot of money for them. Then from there, we started another movement called the 100 Roofs Project with Rosie Perez and Ramon Rodriguez, where we raised over $1 million to build over 100 roofs for families in Sierra Leone or in Puerto Rico. And then we hired Lindsay Stein, this amazing outlier. She was the former editor of Campaign Magazine, and we are, this year we're launching 3 initiatives. The first being 3 different pillars: diversity, equity, inclusion, education, and health and wellness. The first being this week-long celebration of diversity at LACSA, the Los Angeles High School of the Arts, where we are launching Brave Week, a week-long celebration of diversity, and we're going to be giving away our first ever grant of $100,000 to the team that comes up with the best creation. That's happening in the fall. The second is Brave Camp. We're bringing in 100 underserved kids to teach them about the 6 stages of bravery. That happens at the end of July. We're doing that in collaboration with Sierra Nevada's Journeys, a nonprofit campsite. And then the third, we're building the first ever Brave Library in Sierra Leone for the kids. The 63 Brave is what we call them. They're the kids that lost their parents to Ebola. And we're building this library that's going to have 3 different functions. One is going to be a library of brave books written by African authors. The second is going to be a art studio called Lily's Pad. And we're going to document and hopefully try to sell some of their creations so they can help fund the school even more. And then the third is a celebration of culture and community. And our goal is to eventually build 12 libraries all throughout Africa. So those are the 3 things that we're doing right now this year. And that's why I'm moving to New York. One of the reasons why I'm moving to New York is we're going to run it out of a New York office. And then when I look at that beautiful image or feeling that I had in that meditation, I look back and I think to myself, well, it took a tremendous amount of bravery to trust that image, to not dismiss it, to look at it not as a means for how can I make more money off it or how can I do whatever, because at the end of the day, that wouldn't have been as authentic. But look at it for what it really is. You know, it is an essence that's in all of us. It's called bravery. And it is there for us to unlock it, there for us to use it. And because I used it and trusted that image, I look at all the impact that we've created together and the people that I've met because of it. And it just makes me even more confident that exists in all of us. And my number one goal, as my dad told me, never forget those less fortunate. My goal is to help the underserved because I come from underserved as well.
Because it's that image that you were referring to that truly like made me think of your journey. You are one of those few people that's like, I don't personally, this like the very first time I met you and I read about you, but when I look back and like, you know, everybody's an ocean, everybody's a geographic map. When I look at your map, I can tell that like it's all connected, every single step. And, you know, you mentioned Steve Jobs and the famous quotes, like you can only connect the dots backwards. You can't connect it like forward.
You can't connect them forwards.
So,
but you can. I beg to differ with that. I think you can. And I think that by connecting it forward, when you're able to look at it from a bigger perspective, you can connect the ones that you've lived through. But you can also look at the pattern that you've set and the trajectory that you've set and the path that you've navigated, right? And so you can, in many ways, manifest from there and say, well, you know what? I'm going to go live in Portugal. Okay, got it. I haven't done that yet, but I know I'm going to do that. And then when I'm going to do this, I'm going to create 10 libraries instead of one, right? And so you can start to look at your future through the lens of your past, or at least the journey, so that you know that as a creator, you're always looking for new and different ways to reimagine.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, you know, absolutely. I can see that.
And so I look at what I'm doing right now. One of the things that I'm doing right now at David and Goliath is I started a mentor program called the Brave You Mentor Program, and we hired 6 underserved employees, and I've been working with them once a week for the past 6 months in helping them define and create their life manifesto. And it's pretty amazing when you take a look at these manifestos.
Right.
I think I sent them to you, right? The stories. And
it's really fascinating manifesto. Yeah.
And it's taking branding and what we've learned and the importance of inspiring a client or a brand to live their truth, starting with their manifesto, but applying that to everyday life, because we're all brands, right? Whether you're a person.
What I like about what you do is truly like the fact that advertising is only like, you know, allow me this like analogy. If you were an onion,
yeah, same thing.
It's only the first layer. It's only the first layer, right? Like, but the more you peel the onion, the more you find out that there is more to it. And like, you know, and that's why when I meant to say connecting dots backwards, because even like in 1999, when you set up like David and Goliath, you say something that it was truly important for someone working in advertising, which is like, if you have to name your company, name it not just to be contained within advertising, trying to stand for something that means more. And I remember like when I came to LA, one of the first things that I heard was like this agency, David and Goliath. And the first thing I thought was like, who's that fucking crazy guy that named an agency Goliath? Because it's such a beautiful concept behind that you can really tell at the very first second where you hear it, there is more to it. It's not just about advertising. And so that's why I feel like everything is connected, because then throughout your career, throughout your life, look where you are now, look what you're doing now. There are so many good things. Like out of that, it's almost like if it was written in your destiny back in 1999. Anyway, I need to ask you the 4th question, otherwise we're gonna like we could talk forever. But let me,
Yeah, all we need is a nice bottle of scotch and a couple cigarettes, and we'll be here for a very long time.
fourth question. Polluting the ocean turns beauty into a nightmare. It takes away one of the wonders of the world and turns into a commercial dumpster. Now, ideologically, it's like staining the purity of life with a brush of the capitalistic society. Now, I have like a question, I have like a sentence from David Foster Wallace, one of the greatest writer in America. And he say, how can even the idea of rebellion against corporate culture stay meaningful when Chrysler advertised truck by invoking the Dodge Rebellion? Now, how do you react to that? That's what Dave Foster Wallace say, and that's what I mean by polluting, taking like your concept and make it like for a financial like advantage or scope. So I'm going to simply turn this question onto you, because you are the epitome of a guy that breathes and lives beyond advertising. So how do you react to corporate advertising that pollutes the purest ideas of humankind, such as rebellions?
We'll have so much genuine passion for the industry and where it could go. It's a creative industry with so much opportunity. And when I think about the responsibility that and the power that brands have and how they can influence people or inspire people, because they have they have platforms and enough resources to support those platforms. I think about the opportunities for them to really crystallize their values, and those values need to come from a place of truth, right? As opposed to whoever's in charge of that organization. And there's an old saying, tell the truth, it's the easiest thing to remember. I remember when I was first in advertising, there was this tendency to talk about a product truth even though it wasn't really there, right? Or try to paint a different picture for something that was poorly made. And one of the things I look at is Kia's journey, and the fact that it had such a horrible reputation in the beginning for quality. And so we never apologized or we didn't try to hide and paint something we're not. We really talked about our spirit, and the spirit of being a challenger, the spirit of being this small brand in the sea of Goliaths, and that this spirit was always hardworking, always trying to provide greater value to people, and may not be the most perfect journey, but it was a spirit of doing better that has propelled them to where they are today. And it's one of the greatest, I'd say one of my best case studies out there, working on a brand for 22 years and watching them go from virtually not even being on the JD Power list to being #1 in quality.
What I like about that is like, I commend you for the work, because I mean, I'm not the first one to say that like you had an unbelievable work on Kia, and the case study is a 22-year-old case study. But what I like is the fact that Kia grew in parallel to your agency, your company, and that kind of gene of like David and Goliath, the underdog, being small, being the challenger, you reflect into like the client that you were working with. So it's almost, there is this like meta level of a connection that you won't find anywhere else. Like if you go to another agency, they don't have that kind of like connection. And that's I think this is my personal opinion, that the reason why you were able to work on that for such a long time and establish a very solid and like wonderful relationship. So
it's the truth. And because, speaking of the truth, because we were able to use our challenger spirit, or use Kia's challenger spirit, as a means to create greater affinity with consumers, right? Inspiring consumers to give it everything because we give it everything. And because of that consistency, we've had record-breaking sales, since day one. And last year was our biggest year, our best year ever, which is crazy during a pandemic, right? And so when I look at that, and I'm not saying that we were perfect along the way, but I do believe the thing that the secret sauce was embracing the truth of who Kia is, which is Kia is a challenger brand. And then I look at other brands around and I ask myself, we're all challengers. You don't stop being a challenger. Nike didn't stop being a challenger. Apple didn't stop being a challenger. Somebody comes in to the organization, a leader, right? And a leader who could care less about what the company is and what they stand for, but they want to put their own mark on it, right? And they want to do something that may not be the right character for the brand, or they want to do something because their incentive is to, I don't know, sell 5,000 cars in a month, whatever that may be. And when I see brands missing out on the opportunity to live their truth from the inside out, when I see brands doing things that they throw out there just to shock people, I look at that as being stuck in the muck of the way we used to do things, right? Or at least stuck in the muck of the way things were before, where it was a little too casual and easy to be something you're not. And when I look at that type of messaging, I go right to the top of the organization and I ask myself, well, who would allow that type of message? Where it doesn't feel unifying, it doesn't feel inspiring, it doesn't feel a sense of shared values, positive shared values. It feels like somebody with their own agenda, with their own intent on shaking things up without really thinking through the ramifications of what that message is going to be. And to me, I think that comes from an intent to either ego driven or empathy driven. And when you think about the difference between the two, ego is greed, it's hate, it's divisiveness, it's doubt, it's all of these man-made sort of things, right? Whereas empathy is love, bravery, unity, authenticity, inclusiveness, and those are innate. And so when I look at leaders of today and I ask myself, is this leader an ego-driven leader or empathy-driven? Is this somebody who is more using their ego to achieve their sort of results, or are they guided by their empathy, which at the end of the day is going to achieve even more impact than their ego would? And it takes a tremendous amount of understanding that living that truth and embracing that is how you tell a story without any effort, is how you connect with people and consumers in the most genuine way, as opposed to this shock campaign. And I look at the opportunity for brands moving forward. If you haven't learned anything from 2020, then you have no pulse. If you don't have a greater perspective for how consumers want brands to stand for something, then you're in it for yourself. You have to take a look at what just happened and ask yourself, am I happy with the way things are? Do I believe that creating campaigns or ideas that are self-serving or that aren't true to the DNA of the company, are those the right? If you don't understand that the difference between that and embracing values and connecting values with consumers, then the question I ask is, well, who put that person in charge?
Right. No, I mean, it's like you mentioned something that's I've mentioned many times on Transatlantic, the word empathy. You made that kind of parallel between, like, man-made, like ego and like empathy. Empathy is such a natural word. It comes from Greek, like means like, you know, to feel the same with
Yeah.
pathos, pathos being like passion and feelings. And it's one of my favorite words. And
You know what,
right, you were totally
Mira?
right when you say that 2020 has been like a year where if you haven't learned anything, then you don't have a pulse.
You
It's
don't have a pulse.
totally right.
And you know what? When I think of empathy, and I hear people talking about it, going, "Well, I need to get a book on empathy," and I'm like, "A book on empathy? You don't learn how to love. You are love, and
Yeah.
you don't learn how to be empathetic. You are empathy already, right? And so when you understand that you are empathy,
You. Yeah.
then you know who you really are. You are empathy. You are more caring. You are more compassionate. That's in you already. It's just the other stuff, the life conditioning, the ego, all those man-made sort of things, they get in the way, and it keeps you from experiencing your true authentic self. And I really believe that I had this one client ask me, they go, "David, well, what what is authenticity?" And I asked I thought about that question from a client that's asking, "David, what is authenticity?" And I often think that, it's in all of us. Authenticity is in all of us. And if you have to ask me what authenticity is, then you're not asking from the right place.
You're not coming
Because if you
from an authentic place. Yeah.
yeah, because if you ask me from your heart and say, you wouldn't ask me what authenticity is. If you're asking me from your heart, you would probably ask me, how can I get to that? Right? How can I help express that? As opposed to, let me just give me a definition so I can apply that to my brand. And to me, that's the big sort of logic disconnect with our industry, is that people, you don't have to try to be authentic. You just are. And then you also have to give yourself permission to know that you're not perfect, and no one's perfect, and that we're all going through this life. We're making mistakes and failing. And the whole idea is that you've got to understand that those aren't things that are meant to punish you. They're things that are meant to help you grow and evolve.
Absolutely.
To be, a more wise and loving and brave human being.
Look, the fifth question is something that we touched upon already, because it's built around like David and Goliath. But I want to go through that because it's
Yeah.
like, one of the things that fascinates me the most is this idea behind David and Goliath. So it goes like this. As a part of the National Geographic photo competition, there is an image titled David and Goliath that took the heart of millions of people. The picture was taken in 2012 by Octavio Burto during a diving session with a large group of big eye fish, which are some of the oddest looking fish you can find in the ocean. They have gigantic eyes and oblique landing craft jaws. In the picture, thousands of big eye fish swim around Octavio, making him look like a tiny little human trapped by a giant Goliath. In 1999, we talked about this. You founded your own agency. You gave this beautiful name, David and Goliath, on the belief that you could create a distinct culture capable of taking of the toughest marketing Goliaths out there. And we talk about Kia. That's one of the great examples. Now, looking back, what I would like to know from you is, what was the toughest battle that you have fought against a Goliath? And bear with me, it doesn't have to be in the advertising reel. I know that you fought many battles because you come from a family of warriors. But if you were to like pinpoint one of the battles stuck with you that you say, man, I went in there, I didn't know if I were to go out of there, what would that be?
I think that when I think about where I'm from, and the name David and Goliath, the reason why I chose that name is that it would force me to live my truth in everything that I do. And I'd be able to build a company based off of truth of where I'm from and my ability to take on those challenges as a kid, as a teenager, as an adult, and that I didn't have to make anything up. I wouldn't have to try to come up with a different type of positioning or something that was trending or any of that. It would just enable me to be true and live that, knowing that every obstacle and every challenge was going to be thrown my way, and it was going to be my ability to, to sort of see them for what they really are. And when I think about the biggest challenge that I've had as an owner, is that I didn't have any experience running a company at all. I was a creative person, right? And creatives, for the most part, are focused mainly on the work. And I've seen quite a few agencies that were run by creative leaders that, they did great work, but then, they ended up going out of business because they weren't able to manage the other side, the left side. I call it the left side of the brain. And I actually wrote a speech not too long ago, or gave a speech not too long ago at the One Club leadership seminar conference. And it was all about, don't be afraid of the left muscle, right? The muscle that doesn't know creative, the muscle that is more finance and sort of rational driven. And it really was about coming into David and Goliath and the idea of being a CEO and still being a creative, but also creating success. Because at the end of the day, if I could have this beautiful culture, but if I don't have the resources to support it, well, then it's going to go out of business, just like a lot of other creative entities have. And so I looked at success not just as a creative part of it. I looked at it as it's really about taking those two muscles, the right and the left, right, and balancing them so that they are equal. If it was too high up here with creative, well then, I'd produce great work, but it'd be a matter of time before I went out of business. And if I was too up on this side, well then I'm a bank. Right?
I love those like scale, like that right? You have to like even the scale. That's a great analogy.
It was really about bringing them right here and then riding the razor's edge between the two, right? So you're kind of like, in many ways, you are balanced. It's all about, it is the yin and the yang philosophy of business. You are balanced. And obviously, I didn't have any college background when it comes to finance or accounting or business or any of that, because I went to Academy of Art College. I majored in advertising, right? And so one of the most challenging parts of that is, how do you know if you're making a decision that is going to be right financially if you don't have any of that background?
Right.
And what I looked to my upbringing, and I was a scrappy kid. We didn't have a lot of money, so that we would go out there and try to do things to make money, like mow lawns, or I had 2 paper outs. I peeled potatoes, I painted curbs, I did all this stuff. I hustled as a kid. One of the main things that I did was, we lived next to a golf course. And at night, at like 2:00 in the morning, my brothers and I would hop the fence at night and go into the lakes and just crawl around looking for golf balls in the lakes, right? And the mud was putrid and sticky and deep and all that. And we would come away with maybe like 100 golf balls, at the end of the night, bring it home, wash them up, and then sell them in the morning through the fence to the golfers. And I look at that scrappiness and I think to myself, it's about being scrappy. That's what it really is. You take your scrappiness, you take that sort of inner voice, that essence of this feels right or it doesn't feel right. And I applied that to business. I took that aspect of who I am and I married it with my creative, with my knowledge of creativity. And what I was able to do is, I just was able to balance things out in a way that just felt right. And I look back and at the 23 years, and the fact that I sold the agency, which is kind of crazy, right? And now I'm running a nonprofit and still working at David and Goliath. I look back at that, and there may be some people along the way who looked at that and said I would have done things differently. Yeah, everyone could say that, but ultimately at the end of the day, I was able to apply those things that I learned as a kid, that scrappiness, with that inner voice and my creativity, to create not only a successful business, but sell it to somebody who actually would be willing to pay for it. And it happened to be my client, which was the craziest thing in the world.
Because what you just say, by the way, let me tell you that's the image.
But that was my Goliath. My Goliath was being a creative, running an agency, and just doing everything in my power to keep it from going out of business after 3 years. And I had everything thrown my way. I had Kia put the account up for review after the 5th year, and we all know what happens when your biggest account puts their account up for review. A chance of an incumbent winning is like zero, but we won, which was a pretty amazing thing. And that gave birth to a acronym that we still use at the agency called WSP, which means we shall prevail. Mm-hmm. And so I look back at that 5th year as being a big factor, because I had everything on the line: my house, my family, everything was invested in this company. And I was ready to move back to New York if we didn't win it. But fortunately we did. But through that whole process and that was just one instance, there's probably been a million different challenges that I've been up against. But I really believe, going back to that scrappy spirit that I learned as a kid, and also the notion that there's a challenger in all of us, and really aligning myself with people that believed in that, and also aligning myself with people at the end of the day that are in it for the right reason, not in it for themselves. And the right reason meaning, how can we create something that is going to serve the greater good and not our greater ego?
Yeah, it's like what I was saying is the image of you or your brother, like, going like pick up like golfing ball. But it's such an amazing story, like, very interesting, it teaches how, like, being scrappy is like the most important thing, because he has that kind of feeling of I'm hustling. Yep. So which bring me to the 6th question, because this question is about where does your story fit? And it goes like this. So the sailors are great storytellers.
Yep.
When you live in the same confined space with other people, one of the things that we as a human being do is like sharing stories and telling stories. Now, according to Kurt Vonnegut, one of my favorite writers,
the best,
right?
Slaughterhouse-Five.
Humankind lives in a cyclical and perennial recounting of 3 major story formats. The first one is called Man in a Hole, and it's the typical story of falling and getting back up. So it goes from negative to positive. The second one is called Boy Meet Girl, and it's a love story. That's the most common one. And then there is the third one, which is the fairy tale. And it goes like from positive to negative. So you have these like different, like, waves of telling a story, but mainly it's like either from positive to negative, or from negative to positive, or just stay very even, like a love story. So if you were to pick one of this category to fit your story, David Angelo's story, what would that be?
Number 1.
It's beautiful. That's definitely.
It has to be number 1. And also I just want to say that as you grow older, you start to see things a little differently. You start to use your creativity and your wisdom as your strength, as opposed to your actual muscles, because you can't move around as fast, right? But I do believe that being able to sort of take a look at, when I look at my journey and I look at where I'm from, and how it has been so beautifully flawed, right? And when you understand at the end of the day that we are humans falling, tripping, making our way through this life, right? And having that higher sort of observance to be able to look at that and say, well, that wasn't a mistake. That was a beautiful opportunity to experience this, or that wasn't a failure. It's a beautiful opportunity to experience this. And I just knew deep down inside that those were things that I could quickly think about whenever I was going through something, right? So I would, if I made a mistake, I practiced this thing called let go faster, which was this ability to look at something and not hold on to it for a few years, hold on to it for a very short period of time so it frees you up, you know, for bravery and creativity and all the other things, compassion, etc. And as time went on, I was able to let it go even faster. So being able to look at failure and being able to look at the mistakes of life, we all have them. And I think what's happening right now is that there's so many people out there that are hurting, that are pointing to other people's mistakes, other people's failures, because I guess the world loves a train wreck, right? And I think that, and I believe that if we took a step back and observed the real reason behind those mistakes, the real lessons of life and the opportunities for growth, and that if we all took that step back, we would all evolve better and faster. And so I look at falling down is not the most horrible thing in the world. It's behind every setback is an even greater comeback.
Absolutely.
And I look at, you've been brave since you were born. You've been brave since you were born. And one of the things that I tell people is, always remember the times you never gave up. Always remember the times when you were brave and nobody thought that you could do something, right? Go back to those times and remember those times, because it's going to give you even more courage to get back up faster. And you just remember that you were brave the minute you were born. First of all, to be here, you're brave, right? Because it's not exactly a cakewalk, this thing called life. But you came here because you chose to come here. And I believe that requires a tremendous amount of bravery, number one. Number two, you took your first steps. Those were the bravest. That was your first act of bravery. You didn't know how to walk, but you took your first steps. And what's happened over time is all of that life conditioning and all the things that, you know, the people have told you couldn't do something, or that failure is horrible, or mistakes are, you know, that you're doomed by making mistakes. I really believe that all of that life experience has been calcified in us to the point where we don't believe that we're capable of rising again. And I believe that we are. I believe we all have it in us to rise together, to, as an industry and as a world, to create greater good for everyone. It doesn't have to be just for me, it's for everyone. I believe that's in all of us. We all have that in us, and we've all had that from the beginning. We just need to let go of that voice in us that says we can't. And so failure, rising up, taking on challenges, that's part of my path, my journey. I believe that I'm going to continue to see them along however long I'm alive, and I will take the memory of all the things that I've already taken on and bring that to the next one. And I believe that's a really valuable tool for anyone to practice or build that muscle memory of all the times you've been brave, so that next time that you fall, you can get back up faster.
This is great, man. These are, like, I call these like modular answers, because I think like people should just like disassemble and take piece of it and just like keep it like by their side, because I mean, they are very valuable tool that you're giving us, like to truly like go through like a journey. And I'm imagining like, you know, young kids like, you know, starting like new job like in 2020, it's a brutal, like, business. And
It
I
is
feel like
brutal.
some of your, like, information and stories and like experience that you went through are so valuable for them, like, and mostly like when you say go back to the time where you were brave, because you always been brave, like, and if people don't do that enough, I think that when you go back to those times are like source of energy, so you
They
can
are.
tap onto that, and they almost like they are like glacier, like, they're almost like uh, you go there, that you can tap onto them, you can take the energy that you need and then go back to your present life and use it, like, to move around. So
And also create systems for yourself, right? Because as a creator, and this applies to anyone, because I believe we're all creative. As a creator, you can manifest new systems, right? So I have this thing with my daughter, my oldest daughter, that I tell her she can tap into. I call it the BOW, the
Mhm.
Bank of Wisdom. And that you have this wisdom that you've been collecting for the first 22 years of your life. And I said, you've got the bank of wisdom. You can always go back there and take a look at all your past actions, and look at when you thought you weren't going to succeed in algebra, but you took it to a whole nother level. And go back to that bank and watch those, yeah, watch all the times that you were smarter than when you gave what you gave yourself credit for. And when you do that, and I would suggest this is a really cool practice, is just write down those moments so you don't forget them. Keep them in your phone so you can go back to it, and you could see each one. You can look at and go, okay, this is what I applied when that happened. This is what I did when that happened. This is why this took so long. And by doing that, this goes back to connecting the dots. You're able to look at not only the strength that it took for you at 10 years old to take on that bully, to what it took to move to New York, or for you to come to America, or for you to start this podcast. I mean, all of those moments in time were moments where you could have walked away from it or chose not to do it, but you had the courage to do it, right? And the courage to continue it. And so I think that having that recall, and to be able to look at that, is going to give you even greater strength to take on even bigger challenges that you have yet to see or experience.
Right, man. Hey, last question. I'm actually very sad that this is the shore, because I could have traveled your ocean like forever, man. Anyway,
Likewise, brother.
for all our guests, we have the same question. If there was a wind that blow your sail, what would the name be?
Brave.
Yeah, I mean, I already
That's it,
knew the
man. That's
answer.
it.
Why even asking? And let
That's
me
it.
say,
And you know what, man? I mean, I love that question, by the way, because I have a Brave bike. A friend of mine built a bike called the Brave bike. And I'm not saying that I'm the bravest person in the world, but I understand the concept of bravery, and I understand that if the world had more brave, there'd be less fear in the world. And my goal, that's exactly my goal, is forever, how long I'm going to be on this earth, I want to help unlock that in as many young people as possible, because I believe that they are our future. The young outliers, yet to be outliers of the world, are out there. And if there's one thing that we can do as creators, is leave the world a better place before we exit this mortal coil. And I believe that it takes a tremendous amount of bravery to understand that, to embrace that, and to know that it exists in all of us. And so that's all I'm saying, is that it's in all of us. And just even thinking about infinite bravery, just even thinking about that. I know it's hard to think about as a human, from a human perspective, but it's there. We have everything already inside us. And that sort of concept of bravery from the inside is the thing that has been steering me throughout this whole process. And it tells me that I have to help as many people as I can to unlock their own, because I just know that the world would be better because of that.
David, you are one interesting man, my friend. I have
Hey,
to say, thank you so much for being on board the transatlantic. This was one of like the best experience for me, like that I lived through your words and like your journey. And I wish only the best. Have a great move to New York City. Go back to where everything started.
right?
So
It's just
please, like, thank you so much for giving me the time, your time to dedicate to me and to my video podcast. Thank you, man.
my brother. Thank you so much. I felt like I was in a boat with you rowing across the Atlantic. So,
Okay.
and talking the whole step of the way. So thank you so much. And
Thank you, brother. Thank you.
thank you, brother.